for George Russell in his victory in the Canadian Grand Prix.
Mercedes driver George Russell finished the Canadian Grand Prix exactly where he started it, first place.
It was amazing to be back on the top step, obviously.
His fourth career victory came in somewhat controversial fashion, as Red Bull lodged a protest over his behavior under the safety car. But controversy is nothing new for George Russell. His career has been a roller coaster of brilliant highs and frustrating near misses. This is the same driver who won back-to-back titles in F3 and F2, beating none other than current championship contender Lando Norris.
He wins for the seventh time in 2018, and George Russell is the Formula 2 champion.
The same driver who put a struggling Williams car on pole, their first in over 14 years. And the same driver who, in his debut season with Mercedes, out-qualified seven-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. Now, in his seventh season in Formula 1, Russell still isn't seen as a true championship frontrunner. So what happened? How did a driver who conquered almost every junior category with ruthless precision fall behind rivals like Leclerc and Norris? Is it bad luck, bad timing, or something deeper? Let's find out. How good is George Russell? Actually, unlike many of his future rivals, George Russell didn't grow up in a family steeped in racing tradition. But motorsport wasn't far from home. His father, Steve, managed a business selling seeds and pulses, which he later sold to fund his son's motorsport dream. George Russell got his first taste of karting at the age of 7, and right away he stood out. Precise, fearless, and obsessed with every detail. While other kids raced for fun, George was already racing to win.
The kart just felt really good on the engine, so I think I was quite quick as well.
His family didn't have the luxury of throwing millions at top-tier equipment or lavish travel budgets, but they made up for it in grit. His father, Steve, became a one-man pit crew, towing their cart across the UK in a van crammed with tools, spare tires, and ambition. By the time he was 11, George was racing in the top British karting championships, Super 1 and MSA Cadets, and he was already mixing it with the best. In 2009, he won the MSA British Cadet Championship and finished second in the Super 1 National Championship. Not a bad year, right? And around that same time, a younger name started popping up in the paddock: Lando Norris. They weren't going head-to-head just yet, but everyone knew those two were going to cross paths again. The crazy part? While Lando had serious backing, top-tier equipment, elite coaching, George was still doing it the hard way. No trust fund, no big team behind him. He didn't get noticed because he looked the part. He got noticed because he wasn't losing. In 2011, George made the jump to KF3, the category where boys turn into contenders. He joined the Intrepid karting team, and suddenly the names next to him on the grid weren't just good. They were future stars: Alex Albon, Charles Leclerc. It wasn't just about raw speed anymore. This was politics, pressure, and European-level precision. But George didn't flinch. That year, he won the CIKFIA European Championship, one of the biggest titles in karting. He followed it up with a win at the SKUSA Super Nationals in the US, a race packed with the best young talent from all over the world. Meanwhile, Leclerc took the karting World Cup. Albon was battling up front too. You could feel it. That entire generation was special. And George? He was right in the mix. In 2012, he came back even sharper, defending his European Championship. Back-to-back titles that stamped his authority on the field. He almost took a second SKUSA win too after Lance Stroll got disqualified. The win was later given back to Stroll, but still, George had made his point. And Lance Stroll, he won something other than winning his father money.
Posting about
In 2013, Russell adopted a different approach. He was not just hungry for winning, he was learning, improving, and steadily climbing toward the top. By the end of the 2013, the British teenager was ready to make the leap from karts to cars. George's rise through the junior formulas wasn't just impressive, it was textbook. In just 4 years, he won titles in Formula 4, GP3, and Formula 2, each step tougher than the last. Each step met with the same cold-blooded consistency. His car racing career began in 2014, right after karting, when he entered the BRDC Formula 4 Championship with Lehman Racing. It didn't take long for George to make noise. 5 wins, 3 poles, and the championship in his rookie year. The title came down to the final race, but Russell held his nerve and took it. But Formula 4 wasn't exactly smooth sailing for Russell. Originally, he was supposed to race with Prema Racing, one of the top teams in the junior ranks. Everything was lined up, but then came the twist. Lance Stroll's father was the owner of Prema Racing, and you can guess what could happen. Yes, Stroll's father voted Russell from the team to make the seat for his son, and Russell ended up in Korinen Racing. But by the end of the season, total role reversal. Korinen scored 423 points, Prema just 61. By winning the BRDC Formula 4 Championship, George earned his reward, and it was a big one. A promotion to Formula 3, the gateway that brought him one step closer to Formula 1. In 2015, George drove for Carlin, winning a race and took 3 podiums, and just finished behind Charles Leclerc in first rookie year. It was character-building year, but it set the foundation. And next season, he switched to High-Tech GP to compete in the FIA F3 European Championship, the same series where Max Verstappen had stunned the world just a couple years earlier. And while Russell didn't win the title, he did enough to stand out. He won 2 races, took 2 poles, and finished 3rd overall behind champion Lance Stroll. Besides wins and success, one major issue started creating hurdles in his racing journey. The finance to support his motorsport dream. As he jumped from karting to junior career, the cost grows significantly. Russell stated that it cost £50,000 a year if you want to compete, £200,000 if you want to win. When Russell was 16, his father told him he could not keep on funding him and that Russell needed to find a junior driver program. And that's when Mercedes came to rescue him. In early 2017, George was signed to the Mercedes Junior program, the same ladder that had produced Pascal Wehrlein and Esteban Ocon. Suddenly, his path to F1 had structure, support, purpose. That same year, he joined ART Grand Prix in GP3 and everything clicked. George didn't just win, he managed a title campaign with clinical precision. Victories at Spielberg, Silverstone, Monza, and Jerez, each one executed like a veteran. He didn't always have the fastest car, but he always maximized the result. Over 8 rounds and 16 races, he collected 4 wins, 7 podiums, and the 2017 GP3 title, with 1 round to spare. It was dominant, it was calculated, and it was clear. George Russell was the real deal. The reward? A shot at Formula 2, the final step before Formula 1. And then came the season that changed everything, the one that turned young George Russell from a promising talent into a future F1 star. In 2018, he returned with ART Grand Prix to tackle Formula 2, the final and fiercest battleground before Formula 1. And the grid? Absolutely stacked. Lando Norris, Nyck de Vries, Alex Albon, all experienced, all fast, all with something to prove. But George had something they didn't: momentum. He struck early, winning just his 5th race, the feature race in Baku, one of the toughest circuits on the calendar. It wasn't a lucky win, it was clinical. From there, the season turned into a high-speed chess match, especially between George and Lando Norris. They traded blows all year, poles, wins, fastest laps. But George just had that edge, calmer under pressure, sharper in qualifying, and relentless over race distance. He went on to win in Spain, France, Austria, and Abu Dhabi, ending the season with 7 wins, 11 podiums, 5 pole positions, and the 2018 Formula 2 Championship. It was one of the most complete title campaigns F2 had seen in years, and it placed him in elite company, one of the very few drivers to win back-to-back championships in GP3 and F2. That wasn't just a resume builder, that was George Russell saying, "I'm ready, give me a Formula 1 car." But getting a Formula 1 seat is one thing, getting a race-winning competitive car is another. Russell's F2 rivals like Lando Norris and Alex Albon, both of whom he beat, ended up with far better machinery. Albon was given a championship contending seat at Red Bull, and Lando joined a competitive, fast-improving McLaren team. For Russell, despite having won the F2 championship, there was no room at Mercedes. Valtteri Bottas was firmly in place alongside world champion Lewis Hamilton, and the pair had just helped Mercedes secure yet another Constructors' Championship. As a junior driver in the Mercedes program, the team didn't want to waste Russell's talent. So they found him a seat at backmarker Williams, a team they supplied engines to, a stopgap, but also a lifeline. By the end of 2018, George Russell had everything lined up for Formula 1. Mercedes backing, a dominant F2 championship, and most importantly, a race seat. The Williams of 2019 wasn't just slow, it was embarrassingly slow. We're talking about a car that qualified dead last in Australia, a car so bad that George finished 40 seconds behind the next slowest driver in his debut race. 40 seconds. This wasn't the glamorous F1 debut most champions get. This was survival. But here's where George Russell's character really showed. While other drivers might have complained, made excuses, or looked for a way out, Russell saw opportunity. He knew Williams was his testing ground, the place where he'd prove he belonged at the top level. And prove it, he did. In 2019, Russell outqualified his teammate Robert Kubica in every single session. That's 21 qualifying sessions, 21-0. And remember, Kubica was a race winner, a guy who'd gone toe-to-toe with the best in the world. But Russell wasn't just beating his teammate, he was extracting performance from the Williams that defied logic. At the Hungarian Grand Prix, he qualified 15th, in a car that should have been dead last. The lap was so good, so perfectly executed that even the Mercedes engineers were taking notes. Then came Spa 2019. Qualifying, wet conditions, the kind of session that separates the good from the great. Russell put that Williams in 12th position. 12th! In a car that was routinely lapping 3 seconds off the pace in the dry. But the real breakthrough came in 2020. The Williams FW43 was still a disaster, but Russell had learned to dance with it. He was extracting lap times that shouldn't have been possible, fighting for points in a car that had no business being in the points. Then came the race that changed everything. Sakir 2020. Lewis Hamilton was out with COVID. Mercedes needed a replacement driver, and George Russell got the call. The pressure was immense. Fill in for the 7-time world champion, in a car you'd never driven, at a track where one mistake could ruin everything. Russell didn't just rise to the occasion, but he dominated it. He outqualified Valtteri Bottas in his first qualifying session in a Mercedes, against a driver who'd been in that car for 4 years. On race day, he was leading, pulling away, looking like he'd been driving that car his entire career. Then came the pit stop disaster. Mercedes accidentally put Bottas's tires on Russell's car. By the time they fixed it, his race was over. He finished 9th, but everyone knew what they'd seen. George Russell had just proved he belonged at the top level, but instead of a Mercedes seat, he got sent back to Williams, back to the car that qualified last, back to fighting for scraps, back to proving himself all over again. 2021 was supposed to be different. The Williams FW43B was meant to be a step forward. But step forward in Williams terms still meant fighting for the final points positions. Russell continued his masterclass in car control and racecraft. He squeezed every 10th out of that car, often putting it in positions where it had no right to be. But the real moment came at Spa 2021. Qualifying, wet conditions again, the kind of session where Russell thrived. He put that Williams on the front row, second place, ahead of Lewis Hamilton, ahead of Max Verstappen. When the grid was announced, even the Mercedes engineers couldn't believe it. Russell had just outqualified the 2 championship contenders in a car that was designed to run at the back. It was his first F1 podium, sort of. The race was called off after 2 laps due to rain, but Russell had made his point. 3 years at Williams. 3 years of proving he could extract performance from anywhere. 3 years of showing he belonged with the best. But here's the thing about the Williams years that people miss. They weren't just about survival. They were about Russell developing something his junior rivals didn't have. The ability to perform miracles with inferior equipment. While Leclerc had Ferrari power and Norris had McLaren's upward trajectory, Russell was learning to dance with disaster. Every weekend, every session, he was becoming the ultimate test driver, the guy who could take any car and find its absolute limit. By the end of 2021, Russell had proven everything he could possibly prove at Williams. He'd put a back marker on the front row. He'd shown speed, consistency, and the kind of mental strength that champions are made of. The question wasn't whether he deserved a top seat anymore. The question was, would he get one? Mercedes had been watching. They'd seen enough. After 3 years in F1 purgatory, George Russell was finally getting his shot. December 2021. The announcement everyone saw coming, but somehow still felt surreal. George Russell to Mercedes, replacing Valtteri Bottas, partnering Lewis Hamilton. The kid who'd been extracting miracles from a Williams was about to get his hands on championship-winning machinery. But here's the thing about dreams coming true in Formula One. They don't always feel like dreams. Russell wasn't just joining Mercedes. He was joining Mercedes at the worst possible time. The 2022 season was supposed to be Mercedes' year. New regulations, a fresh start, the perfect moment for Russell to make his mark alongside the sport's greatest driver. Instead, he got the W13, the most frustrating car in Mercedes' modern history. While Red Bull were building rockets and Ferrari were finding their speed again, Mercedes had built a car that bounced down the straights like a kangaroo on steroids. They called it porpoising, but Russell just called it hell. Pre-season testing in Bahrain painted the picture. The Mercedes was quick in a straight line but undrivable everywhere else. The car would bounce so violently that drivers couldn't see the braking markers. Their spines were being compressed with every lap. Russell watched Max Verstappen cruise to easy practice times. He watched Charles Leclerc look comfortable in the Ferrari. Opening race 2022, Russell's first race in Mercedes colors, his first chance to show he belonged. The car was a handful. The setup was all wrong. And Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time world champion sitting in the garage next to him, looked just as lost. But Russell didn't panic. He'd spent 3 years learning to drive undrivable cars. This was just another puzzle to solve. He qualified 5th. Not spectacular, but solid. Race day was even better. While others struggled with the bouncing, Russell found a rhythm. He managed the tires, picked his moments, and when the dust settled, he'd finished 4th, his best F1 result at the time. But the real test came next. Saudi Arabia, one of the most unforgiving tracks on the calendar. The kind of place where the W13's problems would be magnified. Qualifying was a disaster. The car was bouncing so hard that Russell couldn't push to the limit. The race was chaos from the start. Safety cars, crashes, strategic gambles. The kind of race where heroes are made and careers are defined. But the season was just getting started, and the real challenges were still to come. By mid-season, Russell had established himself as Mercedes' most consistent driver. While Hamilton struggled with the W13's quirks, Russell found ways to make it work. Spain, 3rd place. Monaco, 5th place. Azerbaijan, 3rd place. Spa, 4th place. He was outscoring Hamilton, outperforming expectations, and slowly, quietly, becoming the leader Mercedes never expected. But the moment that defined Russell's 2022 season came at the Brazilian Grand Prix, São Paulo, the most unpredictable race on the calendar. The place where legends are made and dreams come true. Sunday's race was where it all came together. The start was chaos. Cars everywhere, spray flying. Russell threaded the needle, found the gaps, emerged from turn 1 in the lead, leading the Brazilian Grand Prix in the wet against the best drivers in the world. This time, he wasn't going to let it slip away. Lap after lap, Russell controlled the race with surgical precision, managing the conditions, managing the gap, managing the pressure. Behind him, the field was in chaos. Crashes, spins, safety cars, but Russell was untouchable. Final lap, the checkered flag in sight. George Russell crossed the line first, his first Formula One victory at the most dramatic race of the season in his first year with Mercedes. The kid who'd spent 3 years fighting for scraps at Williams had just won the Brazilian Grand Prix. But more importantly, he'd proven something to himself and to the world. George Russell wasn't just fast in a good car, he was championship material. By the end of 2022, the numbers told the story. Russell had outscored Hamilton 275 to 240. He'd finished 4th in the championship, his highest ever finish. He'd stood on the podium 5 times. Most impressively, he'd been the one constant in a season of chaos for Mercedes. While Hamilton struggled with motivation and car setup, Russell had delivered week after week. The kid from Williams had become Mercedes' new star. But 2022 was just the beginning. Russell had proven he could perform in a difficult car. He'd shown he could handle the pressure of a top team. Now came the real test. Could he win races? Could he challenge for championships? Could he step out of Hamilton's shadow and become the leader Mercedes needed for the future? The answers would come soon enough. Because in Formula One, proving yourself is just the first step. Staying at the top, that's the real challenge. George Russell started 2023 as a race winner. For the first time in his F1 career, he wasn't the underdog anymore. He wasn't the kid trying to prove himself in a Williams. He wasn't the rookie finding his feet at Mercedes. He was George Russell, Grand Prix winner, the driver who'd conquered Brazil in the wet, the man who'd outscored Lewis Hamilton in his debut Mercedes season. But 2023 was about to teach him a harsh lesson. In Formula One, nothing is guaranteed. The season started with hope. Mercedes had worked tirelessly to fix the W14's problems. The car looked competitive in testing. Russell was confident, experienced, ready to build on his breakthrough 2022. The early races gave him every reason to believe. He leads Australian Grand Prix until an untimely red flag and scoring a podium at Barcelona. And then came the second half of the season. What followed was a masterclass in how quickly things can fall apart in Formula One. Singapore made it worse. The street circuit where precision matters most, where one mistake can end everything. Russell was running well, fighting for points, doing everything right. Then on the final lap, he crashed, a moment of lost concentration. A tiny mistake with massive consequences. Another pointless weekend when points were desperately needed. The criticism was starting to mount. The pressure was building, and Russell could feel it all slipping away. Suzuka brought another disaster. This time, it wasn't driver error, it was strategy. Mercedes made an over-aggressive call that backfired spectacularly. Russell found himself out of position, out of points, and out of patience. The team that had given him his breakthrough was now costing him results. But the lowest point came at Lusail. Russell had earned a front-row start, his first in months, a chance to prove that the early season form was still there. The start was perfect. Russell got away cleanly, holding his position, ready to fight for his first podium in months. Then Lewis Hamilton, his own teammate, collided with him. Hamilton, the 7-time world champion. The driver Russell had looked up to his entire career. The impact sent Russell spinning out of contention. Another race ruined, another opportunity lost. Not through his own mistake, but through circumstances completely beyond his control. The season that had started with so much promise was becoming a complete disaster. By the time Abu Dhabi arrived, Russell was desperate for something, anything, to salvage from the wreckage of 2023. The final race of the season, his last chance to end on a positive note. He delivered, 3rd place at Yas Marina, a podium when it mattered most, not just for him, but for Mercedes. The result that clinched 2nd place in the Constructors' Championship. When Russell climbed out of the car in Abu Dhabi, the relief was overwhelming. Not joy, not celebration, just relief that the nightmare was finally over. The numbers told the brutal story. 8th in the championship, the lowest finish for a Mercedes driver since 2012. 59 points behind Hamilton. 59. The teammate he'd outscored just 1 year earlier had embarrassed him over a full season. After the race, Russell faced the media with characteristic honesty. "I let the side down a couple of times this year," he admitted. The words of a driver who knew he'd fallen short. But he also knew what the Abu Dhabi result meant. It means a huge amount to help the team finish 2nd. Even in defeat, Russell was thinking about the team, about Mercedes, about the bigger picture. Later, away from the cameras, he was even more brutal in his self-assessment. A complete disaster. That's how George Russell described his 2023 season. No sugarcoating, no excuses, just the harsh truth of a year that had promised everything and delivered nothing. Mercedes believed in Russell enough to extend his contract through 2025. The question was, could Russell bounce back? Could he rediscover the form that had made him a race winner? Could he prove that 2023 was just a blip in what would become a championship-winning career? The answers would come in 2024. 2024 was Russell's chance to bounce back. Mercedes had learned from their mistakes too. The W15 was a completely different concept from the previous year's car, a fundamental redesign that promised to fix the problems that had plagued them. But early season testing revealed the truth. The W15 was fast, but it was also a handful. Inconsistent performance, difficult to set up, hard on the tires, the kind of car that could be brilliant one weekend and hopeless the next. Russell knew this territory. He'd spent 3 years at Williams learning to dance with difficult machinery. The season started quietly. Mercedes weren't competitive yet, but Russell could sense the potential underneath. "We're making progress behind the scenes," he told the media, keeping faith in the team's development program. Australia brought drama of a different kind. Russell was fighting for 6th place with Fernando Alonso on the penultimate lap, a decent points finish within reach. Then Alonso hit the brakes unexpectedly, what the stewards later called brake checking. Russell had nowhere to go. The crash was massive, 250 kilometers per hour into the barriers at one of the circuit's most dangerous corners. For 10 seconds, Russell sat motionless in his car, completely exposed to oncoming traffic around a blind turn. 10 seconds that felt like a lifetime before race control finally deployed the safety car. Russell emerged unscathed, but shaken, not by the crash itself, but by how close he'd come to something much worse. He met with Alonso afterward to clear the air. No hard feelings between two professionals who understood the risks they take every weekend. Then came mid-season and everything changed. 6 consecutive races with podium finishes. Mercedes had finally unlocked the W15's potential, and Russell was ready to capitalize. Montreal was the breakthrough. Pole position in qualifying, followed by a podium finish. The kind of weekend that reminded everyone what Russell could do with proper machinery. Austria was even better. Russell's 2nd career victory, though it came with an asterisk. The 2 drivers ahead of him collided, handing him the win. Still, he was there to capitalize when opportunity knocked. Silverstone brought pole position at his home race. The British fans were on their feet, expecting another magical Russell performance. Instead, mechanical failure ended his race early. the highs and lows of Formula One captured in a single weekend. But Spa-Francorchamps delivered the most dramatic moment of Russell's season. He won the race, led from start to finish, a dominant performance that looked like vintage Russell, precision, racecraft, and perfect execution. Then came the crushing blow. Post-race technical inspection revealed his car was underweight, disqualification, victory stripped away. The first time since 1994 that a race winner had been disqualified for technical reasons. Russell was devastated, but Mercedes took full responsibility, a team error that cost their driver a well-deserved victory. The season's roller coaster continued into the final races. Brazil looked like another breakthrough. Russell was leading the race, controlling the pace, when Mercedes made a strategy call that backfired spectacularly. They brought him in for fresh tires just before a red flag gave everyone else a free tire change. Russell watched victory slip away through no fault of his own, but Las Vegas delivered redemption. Pole position, leading 49 of 50 laps, total domination on the streets of Sin City. Russell's third career victory, and this time, nobody could take it away. The weekend was a masterclass in racecraft and consistency. Everything that had gone wrong in Brazil was forgotten in the Nevada desert. When the championship points were tallied, Russell had achieved something significant. 6th place in the Drivers' Championship, his highest finish since joining Mercedes full-time. More importantly, he'd finished 22 points ahead of Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time world champion, the driver who'd embarrassed him by 59 points just 1 year earlier. Russell had bounced back from his complete disaster in the best way possible by beating the driver sitting in the garage next to him. The numbers told the story of redemption: 2 race victories, multiple pole positions, and consistent point scoring throughout the season. But more than the statistics, 2024 had proven something crucial about George Russell's character. He could handle adversity, he could learn from failure, he could come back stronger. The driver who'd conquered every junior category was still there. Who'd put Williams cars where they didn't belong was still there. Who'd won his first race in Brazil was still there. 2023 hadn't broken him. It had only made him hungrier. As the season ended, Russell had established himself as a legitimate force in Formula One. Not just a talented driver who'd had a good year, but a consistent performer who could deliver when his team gave him the tools. The question now wasn't whether George Russell belonged at the top level. And now, in 2025, the torch has truly been passed. Lewis Hamilton has left Mercedes to join Ferrari, a seismic shift that leaves George Russell as the undisputed #1 driver at Brackley. His new teammate? A rookie. The future is his to shape. Russell has opened the season with quiet authority. 4 podiums in the first 6 races, each one a reminder that he's not just consistent, he's commanding. And then came Canada, a pole, a composed drive, his 4th career victory. And with it, the question that has followed him since his very first lap in Formula One demands an answer. How good is George Russell actually? The answer: he's world-class. Russell has conquered every level of racing he's touched, from karting to F2, with cold-blooded consistency. He survived the trenches at Williams. He outscored Lewis Hamilton in equal machinery. He's won Grand Prix in chaotic conditions, held off legends under pressure, and bounced back from failure without flinching. He's not just fast, but he's smart, composed, and relentlessly adaptable. And while he might not have a world championship yet, everything about his trajectory, the mindset, the maturity, the resilience, points to a driver who absolutely belongs at the top. So no, he's not a question mark anymore. George Russell is the real deal.